It is Friday, July 18th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Bonanza episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminders. The Essential lineup is still live on PSN, but also we have the PS Plus Extra and Premium July lineup now live on PSN as well, and that also means we have 13 games that will exit the game catalog on August 19th. So about 30 days left to play these games, which is EA Sports UFC 5, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, a big one there. If you did not play that game just yet, you might want to start right now. Also Wild Hearts, Ride 5, and a lot of Sword Art Online games. Those are all going out at the same time. Also Vacation Simulator, and I have a personal affinity for Bugsnax, so I love that game. Now that was available as a monthly title during the PS5 launch, so if you did claim that through that license, you always have that game, but if you don't and you're only trying to play it through Extra, then get your time in on that as well. It's a great weekend game. The Platinum's like 12 to 15 hours or something. It's also got the extra little DLC island, so I love that game so much. But otherwise, yeah, Witcher 3 is the big one. Start playing that now. Anyway, moving on to our first news story. PlayStation Stars, as we all know, is pretty much dead now, so this is the final week of no new campaigns, no new collectibles, but that's the news, is that there is one final commemorative collectible, and that is the Thank You Star collectible. So it's a simple auto campaign. It's already started on your account, and you just have to play any PS4 or PS5 game for this new little commemorative star, this 3-year program that barely felt like 3 years because I guess a rewards program was simply too much. So, I don't know, it's still, I still find it so weird that they killed it this quickly. It felt very quick. I'm just more curious as to, because again, it felt very robust with all the digital collectibles, and they never even made it to your PS5 home screen with the user profiles to where it would look a lot more personable. But I'm curious as to how long those are really going to stay live on the PlayStation mobile app before they just remove that as well. Because they're giving you a collectible right here, unless they plan to archive them for an indefinite amount of time, and maybe you actually can use these things at some point down the road if they ever bring back some kind of rewards program. But then it would just be PS Stars again, so I don't know. I still think the whole thing was pretty silly how this played out. Moving on to PS5 System Software Update 25.05, 11.60, and this one is very similar to a firmware update from not that long ago, where there's only one single changelog item, and that is improving the system software performance and stability. Only that, and not the other item of improving the readability and usability on some screens. Now, we've already gone down the psycho rabbit hole here, or at least I have, which I'm acting like a Charlie Day as far as trying to figure out why they've now separated these line items with different firmware updates, and in some cases they actually do address problems, as they did with that one firmware update not that long ago. I think it was the previous one, to be honest, which was solving the VRR issue. So maybe we'll see another one, which is the readability and usability on some screens, and maybe they will address a problem. You never know. But with that in mind, I'm going to stop rambling about what is essentially a nothing burger PS5 system software update. In other much more exciting news, Sony has confirmed a restock for the 30th anniversary consoles and accessories, depending on where you live. So if you're in the UK or Canada, then the standard console, controller, and portal is getting a limited restock, releasing September 29th with pre-orders exclusively on PS Direct, and that's going to be a separate window for PS Plus members that begins on July 21st, and then pre-orders open for all on July 23rd. If you're in the US, then only the standard DualSense is getting a restock, and that's launching September 9th with the pre-order dates the same as well. So Plus members on the 21st, and then everybody else July 23rd. So I'm surprised that they're doing this. That's good news. It's definitely a bummer that it's this fragmented, which it's also not entirely clear if there's stock allocations for Plus members and then for everybody. You would assume so, because even though Plus members does tighten up that window on the amount of stock, or the chance to secure a controller or a portal or something, chances are Plus members would still be more than enough for however many units they're making of all these things again. So you would presume that there's separate stock allocations, and that's good. But definitely a bit of a head scratcher that in the US there's nothing else for consoles or the or the portal, or not doing the edge again, which you would imagine these things are all high margin. I mean, I get it, they're limited edition, and there's always a novelty to making sure that, like, oh, we do a certain print run, and that's kind of it. But also, it's like, you're a big corporation, you're publicly traded, of course you want to make money. There is a lot of demand for these accessories. People really wanted those controllers, so I don't know. I would imagine the US already had a very healthy, or I say healthy, but they had a very generous allocation out of the initial batch of everything that they did so far. So maybe that's why no console or the portal for the US. But either way, you've at least got a second chance. So there is that. And I would imagine that it is going to be very much a limited restock. So you might want to definitely be there right on time to try and get a pre-order in if you're looking to secure anything here. Moving on to a big news story from this past week, and that is Santa Monica Studio and their new IP, or at least we thought this game was a new IP, so it turns out that might not be the case. Over on Reset Era, on the PS Studios OT, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier gave a status update on this game, and he did say that Santa Monica's next big thing is Cory Barlog's game, and that the last time he spoke to anybody about it, it was going well, and that was about 1 or 2 months ago. But just a few hours later, Jason asked why everyone thinks Barlog's game is a new IP. Then he followed that up with wondering why the internet is melting down over his post, because that seemed like new info to everybody. So Guy Gardner, enjoyer Baby Don't Hurt Me, asked, is it? And so Schreier answered that with, and I quote here, I'll put it this way, it's not a new IP, but it might feel like one. Maybe that's why people are confused. Please don't ask me more questions about this. If I wind up reporting more information at any point in the future, it'll be in an article, not on a forum. I can also confirm that Ashong knows what they are talking about, and that sci-fi stuff that people have apparently believed for years now is nonsense. So for one, I'm kind of surprised that Jason is surprised, because we've seen on at least 1 or 2 occasions that this thing was being considered a new IP from Santa Monica, whether it was a job listing prior, which I think we had one somewhat recently, or LinkedIn postings where employees might refer to it as a new IP. Now, language is always very semantic at the end of the day, so if what Jason is implying is that it's new to Santa Monica, but in the context of them, you know, you might call that a new IP, but not really think about just, again, the sort of semantics of it when it's actually a registered property somewhere else. Maybe Sony owns it, maybe somebody else owns it, and they're licensing it out. Whatever the case is, it's just that the way Jason is explaining it, it's that for Santa Monica, it's new to them, which is definitely surprising. I mean, that I didn't think that's what was going on here for sure. I thought, like, oh, this was going to be a completely new original thing, which would also track with how it would just take a long time to get this thing out the door. Doing new properties from the ground up is generally going to take a lot longer than an established universe. But having said that, I mean, I am also, I kind of like how he called out the sci-fi thing. I've always been very careful to say, like, oh, this is for sure a sci-fi project. Now, whether that's because people have this sort of trailing off from, like, when Race Base was canceled in 2017, around there, or when Cory Barlog had some sci-fi galaxy-type imagery on his Twitter account or something, like, you know, does teasing like that happen? Sure, but does that guarantee anything? No, I would never say for certain that this thing was a sci-fi game. And that was also, like, the surprising thing about Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet when that was shown off. It's like nobody thought Naughty Dog was doing the sci-fi game. So you never know, right? And that's what's really exciting about Santa Monica. That's the thing I'll always sort of circle back around to. And I had mentioned this in the PS2 collection video that we did on Tuesday. It's like I got to Connecticut, and with Santa Monica, it is always a matter of they've been the home to many smaller incubation teams, so their studio name is credited on other titles. Don't get me wrong. But Santa Monica proper is just strictly Connecticut, God of War, God of War, God of War, God of War, you know what I mean? So I just want to see something different from them. And I really don't care if it's something that already exists. But at that point, speculation-wise, I mean, this could get very interesting. At least we have a fairly recent update. He says 1 or 2 months ago he got the status update that the game is progressing well, and that is their next big thing. So yeah, 100%. Let's see what it is, and I do hope we do see it within the next year or so. Let's move on to some new details for Ghost of Yotei, where recently Sucker Punch's Nate Fox and Jason Cannell have been doing a lot of interviews. They're on the press junket with the game coming out, you know, relatively soon, so this stuff's going to ramp up more and more. And we recently found out that for the game being very open, the most open Sucker Punch has ever done, it is still very structured. So with the Yotei 6, you cannot kill them in any order that you want. There is still a basic story arc here that has a beginning, middle, and end. So speaking with Game Informer, Cannell said, and I quote here, "So the balance, without giving away all the details, is there is a structure there, a very important structure. But the way it's presented in the first few hours of the game, especially that first section, is it is really about us delivering to you which aspects of the Yotei 6 you want to go after first. There are some options that might lead you in some interesting areas." Now, I do also want to add here that Games Radar also spoke with Fox and Cannell, and we also learned that the revenge story is just one part of it, so really that's the start of it is what we're hearing. So without giving away anything, there's more to Atsu's story. Which that part doesn't surprise me. I would have thought that the Yotei 6 is maybe like the first half of the game, and there's really a whole other mess of greater conflict and issues, and however the story decides to play out, that's really what they're willing to, or rather, that's what they're unwilling to show right now, right? They're not showing much of the firearms, they're not talking a whole lot about the wolf, which they kind of did for a little bit, but generally there's some things you want to hold back, and so I think as far as marketing goes, the Yotei 6 does make sense in the here and now. If anything, that, you know, I could see the argument of that part of the story being more on the cliche side. But here's the thing. When they kept saying that the game was going to be very open, the most open for Sucker Punch, going in any order for the Yotei 6 would have been, I think, a bold approach, and I would have liked to see them attempt that. They're right, though, in that there's more pitfalls as far as if you let the player go in a very non-linear fashion. I think no matter what, you have to sacrifice certain storytelling elements and how that story is going to be interpreted, or just trying to account for every fringe case of how the player goes about doing it to try and tie together that story in the way you want it to be told is just going to be much harder to do. So I would say I'm disappointed, but I don't know. I guess we'll still see. There's nothing wrong with making sure that players will safely go about it in a way where, you know, as they frame it, maybe there's a different ways to get to each particular member, even though you have to go about it in the order that they want you to go through it. But since there's so much more to the story that is beyond the Yotei 6, that is also still something to look forward to. Now, something else we also learned from all the press interviews is that there's the typical flashback sections where you can see a young Atsu and talk with her family and sort of experience, you know, what it was like growing up before the Yotei 6 came along. And that's similar to what we saw with Tsushima, right? Tsushima and a lot of video games will have flashback sections, but it seems like they're taking this a step further where there's designated areas in the game where you can just hit a button, like there'll be a button prompt, and you can revisit those flashbacks at a whim. And these are like always open to you, so they're not linear in the sense that like they happen and you can never return to them. You always have the option to revisit the past and talk to certain characters that were alive at the time, or, you know, however you want to experience the young Atsu storyline, which I hope they play around with that a bit more than what they're willing to tell, because I kind of love that. The whole idea of you can actually spend a lot more time lore-wise. I imagine the young Atsu portion maybe won't have that much combat, although I could be wrong about that as well. Young Jin had some combat in there, so there's that distinct possibility, but I sort of like that that's always an option to you. A lot of storylines in games, that is the thing. It's well, more so in linear storytelling. You have the flashback, but you don't go back to that unless you finish the game, wrap up, and then have to do chapter select. But for what is an open world game, I kind of like that that's always there. And they do talk about the novelty of the PS5 SSD and that, yeah, we can load in those assets very quickly, which I'd be curious to see just how wildly different the environment might be since it's supposed to be the same location. So surely they've got enough room and memory to maybe change a handful of things, but I'll be curious to see what they're laying down here. Now, Game Informer did also take the opportunity here to ask about inFamous, if they would at some point revisit the franchise, maybe do a re-release of the trilogy, something like that. And so Nate Fox said, and I quote here, "I would love to work on more inFamous. I would love to see a trilogy re-release. But Sucker Punch is a one game at a time shop, and right now we are very focused on finishing Ghost of Yotei." Now, that's an answer that you were always going to get. I don't think there's anything else he could have reasonably said that would acknowledge what we ideally would like to see, because yeah, they would not do this in-house. I mean, some studios, don't get me wrong, that is kind of how they operate, where you can set aside a small team, and we've said before that could be for onboarding, that could be great for the new hires, that could be something that gives staff something to do while another project ramps up, and Sucker Punch is not really like that right now, so it doesn't necessarily have to be them in-house. But, you know, of course, Nate's not going to acknowledge the distinct possibility of SIE wanting something like that and handing it off to, let's say, a Nixxes software, which is what I would love to see Nixxes do. I mean, if that's sort of the idea, and that they're going to start handling more original works and perhaps more porting projects that are not necessarily just PC stuff. So now they're doing things like Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, moving Helldivers 2 over to Xbox, or doing the chronological Last of Us Part 2 patch. It would be so great to have them go to PlayStation 3 and cherry pick some IP that need to get a just a port. We don't necessarily need a remake. I don't need them. I just need these things to be financially viable, and I would love to see SIE test the waters of some of their, you know, unproven to a degree IP that from the PlayStation 3 days they were willing to put down. Which, as another tangent, I'll always say, like, that's what I've sort of appreciated about PlayStation as a manufacturer, as a publisher. They're willing to empower their own creators as far as, if you want to put down this property and move on to something else, that's fine, do that. And oftentimes they encourage that, which it does get into the logistics of, oh, look at how Resistance 3 did, that franchise over time, as an example, right? And they wanted, well, Insomniac did pitch a Resistance 4, and that didn't get very far. So look, not to say that there's not always those business implications of these things don't reach a certain milestone, but generally speaking, across PlayStation history, the company has been known to walk away from even successful IP to try and do something different. I like that. That's fine. And on occasion, the generational turnover happens, a new audience comes in, and there are folks that to this day have not had the chance to play a MotorStorm, an inFamous, a Little Big Planet. You know, the opportunities are out there. So I'd love to see it, and definitely for inFamous, no doubt about that. Next up, we have some concept art from the canceled Deviation game, which this was spotted by MP First, where it was a part of an artist portfolio, so they were formerly Deviation staff, and so we can see the images, and there's not a whole lot to go on, but you can get a sense of what the game was potentially going to be. One of them does have a 2020 timestamp on there, so... And granted, Deviation pretty much only had this one game going. They lost funding from Sony, and they were not able to find a new publishing partner. But the timestamp is from 2020. It is very much that game. The art does show various weapons like pistols and rifles, and one of them is a very futuristic-looking power glove. There's also a very clear sci-fi theme going on. They're just concept images, and I will probably be the first person to always say, you can't really say much of anything about these outside of, okay, there's a general direction and sense of what they were trying to put together. Outside of that, you really can't say anything else. The game could have been damn near anything. It's always fascinating to look at the concept art and think, okay, that's sort of where they were going with this. But, you know, given the timing and whatever sort of build they had, there's probably a multitude of reasons why they canceled it. And I wouldn't say just looking at concept art alone, you can understand why. Just that it's always fascinating to look at that stuff. Moving on to something that seems to be definitely more prevalent nowadays, whether it's just AI slop on PSN, the eShop, Steam, or if it's just straight up stealing things and trying to sell them again. We don't often see this like on console storefronts, but sometimes it happens, and in this case it was WipEout, the well-known PlayStation IP. The PS1 WipEout games have appeared on Xbox, so they showed up as a game called Anti-Gravity Racing WipEout from LLS Games, which the intro video was stolen from somebody on YouTube, the music was stolen, the full games themselves were stolen because they appear to be just the emulated WipEout games running on Xbox, so they're running in an emulator, but they did very much appear on the store. You could buy the game, and it's already been taken down. Digital Foundry looked at the game and just spent some time analyzing it, figuring out what's going on, so John Lemon gave his thoughts on that, so he seems pretty confident it was all running under emulation, but that's just one of definitely many cases where this happens, you know, again, more often than we think. It's it's kind of insane just well, and this probably gets into more of the sheer saturation of games and how much stuff comes out nowadays. Like we did have a story, which we're not piecing this off separately, but it was a matter of how much AI use was happening in games. And so a recent poll went out and the percentage of AI disclosures on Steam jumped 800% from 2024. But when you talk about the sheer volume of things that are published on Steam, which Steam alone is thousands of games, and that's typically a lot of smaller teams or just indies, one particular person that's loading up Game Builder or something like that, and they're publishing anything that they can. So, you know, there's definitely going to be a lot of heavy AI use, or in some cases, bad actors. But console storefronts, which has some checks and balances, obviously not nearly enough when we see these things still hit the storefront before they're taken down. Yeah, you're going to see these things happen, and perhaps it will be more and more common if they don't start tightening up the grip on letting this stuff through. Let's move on to some third-party news, where the speculation is ramping up more and more for the possibility of GTA 4 getting a modern PlayStation port, and also Red Dead Redemption 2 getting a PlayStation 5 native version. So the Rockstar support pages for these games, GTA 4, for example, had PS4 listed as a supported platform, and that was quickly removed. And then Red Dead Redemption 2 support page, that one had an online migration tab listed, and that's also been taken down as well. So the insinuation there is that you would need that for Red Dead 2's online, so similar to the online migration needed for the outgoing PlayStation systems with GTA Online, for example. So probably what they would need in this case as well, based on how those games operate server side. But between that, which there's been so many murmurings going around, and also GTA 4, we had Rockstar's, the one person that's been very insightful on Rockstar happenings, Tez2, already insinuated these things are coming anyway. So between that, the Arthur Morgan actor sort of hinting, then that thing got pulled back. That was like a whole shenanigan that we didn't really go over. But these things are likely, definitely, I would imagine, in the pipeline. It's just, it would be really great in particular for GTA 4. Again, that's the one game where on the PlayStation side of things, there's no way to access that on modern PlayStation hardware. The thing with the Rockstar support pages, though, those don't really telegraph anything because there's like a lot of inconsistencies on their site as far as like what's listed and platform fixes, and just their site's kind of weird and outdated in such a way where you can't really look at that and think, oh, this is for sure happening, despite it being an official product support page. Just that I would think financially it makes pretty reasonable sense that they would move these games over and try to monetize them just even further than they have before. At least with Red Dead 2, that seems all but certain. GTA 4, maybe not nearly as much, but I would love to see that game come over. Although I would think that GTA 4 comes over, it's going to be purely story mode, and probably you'll get Liberty City's episodes from Liberty City as well. They'll move over all the single-player content, but outside of that, it would be a pretty bare-bones port. I would think they aren't actually going to touch that game too much outside of a frame rate and resolution bump, because that's sort of the Rockstar way with these games oftentimes. Moving on to Microsoft and Forza Horizon 5, where we have some sales data for this game. Thus far, we've not really had any confirmed numbers for how well Microsoft is doing selling their games on PlayStation 5. Outside of Call of Duty stuff, I mean, generally speaking, some of the more Xbox prioritized IP, we did allegedly hear about Sea of Thieves crossing over 1 million sales, and that was like within a month. But for Forza Horizon 5, that seems to be doing even better. So we had this info from a former Turn 10 level designer. They had this listed on their LinkedIn that they created cross-platform features for the game, and that enabled the title to sell 2 million units in 1 month on PS5 alone. So Forza Horizon 5 was undeniably a very big launch on PlayStation 5. And, that just sort of tells you more and more the place Microsoft is coming from. And the thing is, it's pretty indicative of where a lot of publishers and Sony even are coming from in some cases, right? Exploring PC, licensing IP out to eventually have it ship on Nintendo Switch, and in some cases even willing to let Helldivers 2 go to Xbox in a very willing manner where they're publishing it. And that does say a lot. There's been even more discussion now with Sony finally making a move like that, where we can see their hands are not tied behind their back. And it's like, okay, well, would there be more? And I think Helldivers 2 sort of represents a distinct possibility of that happening. I'm still not entirely sure how likely it would be, and I would think it's still very contingent on certain games and certain properties, but it's also, in the face of a possible Xbox in maybe a year from now that is going to launch PlayStation Studio PC games, Sony might not even necessarily be that motivated to ship games there anyway. You know what I mean? That's kind of the weird thing, is that they, if anything, should have sold Helldivers 2 in the here and now, which is what they're doing, to make those a la carte sales and that sort of freshness of the game on Xbox while it's still somewhat relevant before this, Windows-based one shows up. Now, semi-good news here for physical media, but Oblivion Remastered on PS5 is indeed getting a physical disc print, so this was confirmed where the pre-orders are already live, with the release expected in October. Now, there's no word on if the game is going to be fully on disc or not, just that we had some UK retailers already put this info out there and start accepting pre-orders, which is very similar to how we heard about that for Gears of War Reloaded. So we still don't know as of right now if all the game content is on there, but ideally it should be. I mean, this is one of the few circumstances where when you have a sort of very clear delay of the digital release versus physical, that's ideally, it's annoying, sure, but that's generally what you want, is the game to come out a little bit further down the line on disc, because then various patches which have already been deployed for this game should all be printed and available on the disc, so you have a nice, fully playable offline build. It's just, they have plenty of room here to do that now. There's no deadline pressure of, this game needs to be shadow dropped by X, Y, and Z date and time. And that's usually the big hurdle of why these games show up incomplete, even though Microsoft in some cases has been really dropping the ball on that. But, there's no excuse here. So ideally, we will get a good print in October. Now, in other physical video game news, we also have Life is Strange Remastered, announced for PlayStation 5, coming out October 2nd. The pre-orders are live right now on Square's site, and it's $60 USD, and it comes with Life is Strange Remastered, Before the Storm Remastered, Life is Strange 2, True Colors, and also the recent release of Double Exposure. But the problem is that True Colors and Double Exposure is the only two games on the disc. Everything else is a code in the box. So, obviously frustrating, and you would expect a rant right here, but here's the thing. Yes, you've got 100 gigabyte discs on PlayStation 5. I believe Double Exposure, Chapter 1, 2, or so. I honestly, I don't know what the full game is. I think the first chapters are like up to 20 gigabytes or something. True Colors is like 30 gigabytes, and the rest are relatively small. In theory, yes, most of it could be printed on one disc. And even if they were to go a little over 100, obviously, we could always make the case that a second disc could be included as well, which very few publishers choose to then pay for that second disc, which to replicate a second disc is usually like $6 or $7. It's more than some people think, but it's still not nearly as prohibitive as, let's say, a Switch 2 game key card, which is around like $20-something. So that's really expensive, but in actuality, the issue here is that those prior Life is Strange games, all of them or some of them, basically they're PS4 games. They're native PS4 titles. There's no native PS5 games, and this would be more of a stipulation on Sony's part. You cannot print a PS4 and 5 game on the same Ultra HD Blu-ray. That's just not a thing Sony does. Sony doesn't do a sort of smart delivery kind of thing here. Sony has a very sort of one-way path with their game upgrades from, let's say, 4 to 5, right? And that you can use PS4 discs on 5 to play a digital PS5 copy, but no discs ever go into a PlayStation 4, which granted, sure, it wouldn't need to go into a PS4 in this case, but there's just a printing stipulation on Sony's end. You can't print PS4 games on PS5 discs, and they can't populate next to PS5 native versions. So it is something where Square kind of, in a way, gets a pass. As far as even the retail side goes, I'm more than certain Sony also doesn't allow the printing of a PS4 disc next to a PS5 one in a single case with the, flap in the middle. Like, you can't do that. So that's like one thing I thought was worth pointing out about this recent announcement, which, got a lot of flack. But, you look at the breakdown of these games and the native versions that are available, and Square probably can't do it even if they wanted to. Next up, we still have some gaming events to play out for the rest of this year. So, unsurprisingly, Sony will not be at Gamescom. That was confirmed pretty obviously it would have been announced way sooner if they were, so they've not been at Gamescom since like 2019 or something. But China Joy, they will be there again, so that's next month, actually August 1st to the 4th, and that's the very big expo in China where we can expect China Hero projects, probably Lost Soul Aside will be there, Where Winds Meet, that was recently announced, and that's going to be a PS5 console exclusive, so Sony does have an agreement there, probably Wu Chang, Fallen Feathers, and it's just something where Sony's been committing a lot of heavy resources into the China market, so it would make sense that they're willing to go to a China Joy event on an annual basis versus something like a Gamescom or Paris Games Week nowadays. Although Gamescom, I mean, is huge, like absolutely massive. So if anything, it's kind of a surprise that they're still not willing to go back to Gamescom, but they'll do that for TGS nowadays. But either way, we do have some news that we can expect out of China Joy in about 2 weeks. Moving on to The Last of Us HBO Season 2, where the Emmy nominations are coming in, and there's 16 total for the show, which is less from Season 1, but still they're in a lot of categories this year, so that could be things like a number of outstanding categories. That's like music supervision, prosthetic makeup, contemporary makeup, picture editing for a drama series. There's a lot of those. And then they've got Best Drama Series, Best Actor in a Drama Series, that goes to Pedro, Best Actress in a Drama Series for Bella, and then Best Guest Actress in a Drama Series for Caitlin Dever and Catherine O'Hara. So definitely a lot of things in there. I imagine they'll win some of those, probably not all of them. But hey, still good to see that. I thoroughly enjoyed Season 2. It's still, with more time sitting on it, it's like a 7 out of 10 for me. I'm somewhat upset with the direction, but I still enjoyed it, And that goes into our next news story about the possibility of a Season 4, which it was not long ago at all that we had heard, a Season 4 is likely, that they're looking to possibly break it up again. And now it seems like maybe a slight backpedal, so we're hearing from Variety, or rather speaking with Variety. The HBO content chairman and CEO, Casey Bloys, was talking about how Season 3 is definitely planned for 2027, if you had any doubt. So we're going to be waiting a very long time for Season 3, which blows. But they did say that Craig is still working out whether it's going to be 2 more seasons or one long season. Which, I don't know, the read to me is that it seemed like they were fairly confident that, we're going to do a 4th season. And now maybe based on some numbers from Season 2's performance, which, again, not necessarily bad, but I think HBO wants to be very mindful of, if we drag this thing out to 2029, and if Season 3 doesn't go well, they're not going to greenlight a Season 4, which at that point, HBO doesn't want to sit on a series that's incomplete. It just looks a certain way, and so maybe there is that kind of more candid and tough conversation behind the scenes of maybe we should just commit to wrapping this thing up and get it done. Which I'm still in favor of a Season 4, if only because I think there's a very good opportunity to spend more time in Santa Barbara and talk more about the Rattlers and explore what is that final arc that, sure, is only 2-3 hours in the game, but I think that's what is... It doesn't suck, but it is kind of a missed opportunity. You only spend 2-3 hours there, and I think you could absolutely spend more time exploring that part of the Last of Us universe. So I'm actually in favor of a Season 4, and if they still sort of maintain what makes the games so great, which they kind of lost a little bit of that in Season 2, if they get back on track with Season 3, then I'd love to see them do 4 as well. But also, if they go at the pace they've been going, then that means, Santa Barbara is easily a 1-episode thing all day, every day, based on how they've been doing things. So if that's how they choose to do it as well, I guess I wouldn't really hate that. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was finally going over the entire PlayStation 2 collection. So At this point now, we've done PS2, 3, 4, and 5. What's left is PSP, Vita, and PS1, which, by the way, when I get to PSP and Vita, I'm going to just put those together because those collections aren't super huge, and it will probably break down to the same 2-hour something time frame. But if you want to hear me just BS for 2 hours about a bunch of PlayStation 2 games, that was the Tuesday upload, and we'll probably have something else on Tuesday as per usual, but that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.